Patty, I'd like to call the meeting to order, please. Hello? Christian?
Councilmember Wilson? Here. Councilmember Black? Here. Councilmember Derringer?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Piper is absent, and Mayor Murray.
Here.
Let's see. Pledge of Allegiance. Karina, would you like to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance this evening?
Place your right hand over your heart. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And Chief's right at the top of the list here.
Oh, very good. My turn.
Presentation, proclamation, and announcements. Chief Kane to give Fire Department update regarding the June 2024 brush clearance inspections.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the council, members of the audience. Acting Assistant Chief Kane, Los Angeles County Fire Department, for your local jurisdictional area. Sure. So,
Do you need a clicker or are you okay?
it's space bar?
I think Arrow.
Arrow, yeah. Okay, so happy to say and report that the 2024 season of our annual brush clearance and defensible space inspections have been completed. It was a very successful year for us here on the peninsula. So this is just a little bit of an overview on what we're looking for with the respective zones, of course, with our graphic there. And I'll go through some pictures and some additional slides to show you what our resources in the field use when they go to a respective address and what it looks like on our dashboard and how we conduct our inspections. So this is obviously the Palos Verdes Peninsula. Each one of those green dots is a respective improved parcel on the peninsula. Each one of those green dots receives an inspection by one of our firefighters here in the peninsula. And as you can see, we are at 99% compliance. And the 1% that is still outstanding is the ones that violations were issued to, creating a 1%, which will require a re-inspection. Moving forward, this here is an illustration of the dashboard as it relates to Fire Station 56's area. So there's 1,424 improved parcels within your respective area. Each one of those green dots represents one of those parcels. As you can see, we're at 99% compliance here in Rolling Hills, and once again, that 1% indicates some of our outstanding inspections based on re-inspections that are needed for those particular parcels that were non-compliant, which there was only 11. So this is an illustration from our dashboard that illustrates the 11 parcels that were non-compliant within 56's jurisdictional area. Each one of those orange boxes is one of those addresses, totaling 11 that will receive a re-inspection or might already have actually received it. Some of them might already have received a re-inspection. So if you were to have the dashboard in front of you and our firefighters in the field use an iPad that they take with them and they do these in real time, and they can go back and add more information via a desktop when they get back. So they're adding in here the violations that they saw on this respective address, which is the top pink surrounded box with the number 1 on it. That's the address that has these violations here. So you can see this one says remove leaves, needles, and other vegetation from the roofs, establish defensible space 30 feet around the structure, remove all dead and dying trees, establish a defensible space within 100 feet around the structures, and establish another 200 feet around the structure. So this particular address needed to do quite a bit of work, which is one of the reasons it had a 410 written for it. It was found non-compliant, and then we'll receive a re-inspection here shortly. So we also download a form into the desktop of the actual 410 that is handwritten, that is issued to the parcel owner. So that's what's depicted here. You can see that's what is written and left on that respective address when we leave, so they know what we found and what they need to fix. And obviously who to call and ask further questions if they should have any, about what needs to be done. If you really want to get in depth on a respective address, because you're thinking that that respective address could be like a repeat offender over the course of previous years, you can toggle down on some of these drop downs, and you can see this one here has had, this is the center address with the pink box there, has had previous years where it was non-compliant, and you can drill down even further on what reoccurrences they're having as far as why they are being non-compliant. So this is some of the things that we can, some of the tools that we have to help us during our respective inspections. And we had a lot of questions and discussions this year about the easements within the 56 area. So I understand that the homeowners associations and the easements were well taken care of this year. However, this was one particular area that Engine 56 did notice that some improvement could be done, and then this is the subsequent violation, or the 410 we call it, that was used or written to give to the homeowners association, just to give them a little nudge to say, hey, this area could use a little bit more work to be 100% in compliance, and we would really appreciate it if they did that, and then they'll be receiving a re-inspect on this particular area in about 2 weeks, about 14 days. And that is the end of my presentation, and I'm open for any questions or discussion, should you have any.
Members of the council, any questions?
I do.
Yeah.
So this inspection on the last page, the last screen was from the 7th? So
Yeah,
a couple
we just
days
took
ago?
care of that. So I asked my guys, just this- on the 7th, do one more drive-through to make sure that the easements are within 100% compliance, because I knew I was gonna present to you all tonight. And subsequently, when they did that, they noticed that, oh, we did miss an area here. And on that particular day is when they wrote that citation, that
That
410.
was yesterday, right?
Yes.
Okay. And is this the website that you're referring to, is that available to the public, or is that?
No, that's our own internal dashboard. We call it the deck list. Yeah.
Thank you.
I have a question
Sure.
on the 1,400 parcels. How, and I'm sorry, I can't tell from the map, how far outside of Rolling Hills do you go?
See if I can.
Like on that 1,400, that's probably in RPV, includes some RPV and things like that?
Yeah, so where your particular boundaries exactly are, we'd have to probably do an overlay. But as far as Engine 56's first in district, so that's how, you can see on the left-hand side, I picked Engine 56 as their first in district on which parcels they are actually responsible for. So their jurisdictional area. And that's everything that's listed here in green.
Okay.
So if there's any overlap with Engine 56 and other areas of the peninsula, that could be within here, but it shouldn't be.
Yeah. Since we've only got about just about 700, or,
Yeah.
a little over 700, I figured it must be bigger, so
Yeah.
Do I ask for questions from the public, or,
That's at the discretion of you, Madam Mayor.
okay?
I would have a
yeah,
question before.
thank you.
Since, thank you, Mayor, for clarifying that 1424 parcels are more than what we have in Rolling Hills. Of the 11 non-compliant, are they all in Rolling Hills, or are some of them outside Rolling
That I
Hills?
would have to do some more homework on, so unless you all are better at the map than I am. So those orange boxes there are the 11 that were non-compliant.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to see streets
Yeah.
on that.
Rolling Hills.
Okay, well, thank you for sharing, but you must be better at the map than I. I don't know where the streets are, nor can I tell where the border ends, but, yeah, so I just thought maybe you might know.
Yeah.
Okay.
One last thing, just to clarify, so the question that's on a lot of people's minds, so your inspections are over in Rolling Hills. If we've not received a 410, we're good.
You're good. Yes. And just to be clear, there was only, 12 now, 410s issued in all of the Rolling Hills area.
Okay.
Only 12.
Okay. If the members of I'll open it to questions from members of the public. Please keep it brief, and remember that we're very happy that Chief Kane is here. Let's not fire him here, or fire on him.
Hang on, but so yeah, you do have to come up.
Mr. Visco.
Yeah, thanks. Alfred Visco, 15th Century. On the roadside clearance, I see you're citing the HOA now. How many citations to the HOA were given?
Only one.
Only one. That's my only question.
Thank you. Mr. Rain.
Hi, Charlie Rain, Hill Road. It seems like the inspections kind of went backwards in that it used to be 10 feet. Like 2 years ago, you guys started enforcing 10 feet off the roadside for it to be cleared back and up to the sky. When the guys came down to our road, they were not really after that. And I know some streets, for instance, Spur Lane, where if you go to the cul-de-sac, the bushes are right to the road edge. I mean, you can never turn a truck around. It just concerns me that if there were a fire and we're trying to exit our neighborhoods, if the brush is coming right up to the road edge, then so
It's
is the
gonna be hard,
fire.
yeah, I get you.
So I wish you'd go back to, like, kind of going by the book on it, even though, I
Yeah.
mean, we'd have to too, and we do ourselves, but I wish everybody did.
Can I ask a question on that? Could it be that that's something that was referred to the homeowners association?
It most very well could be. I'd have to do some more.
The ones on Spur, if they're in the easement, the roadside easement? We asked the fire station, and the homeowners association agreed that those issues would be sent to them, not to the homeowner, and then everybody would get involved back and forth, so.
It's not just there. I just, there was an example, but I know that one, that cul-de-sac is growing right down to the edge.
Right on, okay.
There's others.
That's, what street?
That's Spur.
Spur, okay.
Yeah.
And I didn't even pay him to ask that, when that's right in my area, and I didn't even pay him to bring that up. Thank you, Charlie.
I'll have my guys go back down there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Marita?
Hi, I wanted to start by saying we know that the.
Excuse me, Marita, can you give your name, please?
Oh, I'm
Just
so
for the
sorry.
record, that's okay.
Sure. This is Marita Garrity. I'm a homeowner. We know that you guys have so much more responsibility for inspections than you used to have, and it increases exponentially every year. So when we look at that, and it's 1,400 homes, and that was just covered by Station 56?
No, so to be clear, so every weekday, Monday through Friday,
Right.
we're bringing in 5 additional engines to the peninsula to help us get through the entire peninsula. And that was
Right.
happening 5 days a week. And on the weekends, we were bringing up 2 additional engines to help us maintain that momentum throughout the 30 days that we were here.
So there are other neighborhoods, though. I mean, there's PV and there's RPV. So for these inspections, these ones that you've shown us tonight, how many people were handling those besides, like, how many people from 56? How many men were actually working those 5 days, which is like 20 days?
Yeah, so Fire Station 56 had 3 personnel.
Right.
So it's 3 personnel per day. And 56 likes to do their own inspections
Got it.
for consistency and maintaining their own
Right.
jurisdiction area.
And
So engine 56,
they did their own.
they did their own.
Which I think is great because they understand the neighborhood more. But actually, the point I was wondering about in terms of man hours is that's 20 days, 3 guys.
Well, it was a
1,400.
30 days. We were doing 7 days a week.
Right. Oh, you were? Because
7 days a week.
that's an enormous number of houses per day. And we have big lots. If you were going to even just walk down my block when people have multiple acres, it would be pretty hard to do more than 1 or 2 at most in a half an hour period. And I'm wondering how.
How thorough they are?
I'm actually wondering how it can get done. I think you guys are between a rock and a hard place. You've been told to do something, but when I look at the manpower hours, I'm thinking maybe there's a connection, not because you don't want to cite it,
Right.
but because literally there isn't enough time to do a thorough job.
Yeah, I know they do divide and conquer, and I don't know if you've seen them out. They have like a little golf cart that they're also using to cover more ground more quickly.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Okay.
So, and they are going their separate ways with each one respectively having their own iPad to cover more ground. They're not all 3 doing one house.
Oh, no,
at
no,
one
I
particular
didn't think
time.
that.
Yeah.
Well, then I would just jump on to what you said in the back, just, Charlie, to say that if it's not a time question, then I do think in the future it could be perhaps done more strictly, because there are plenty of houses where the bushes are coming right up to the edge of the road. So just maybe for next year. Thank you so much.
Anything else from the public? Hearing none, I'm going to close public. Chief, thank you very much for your report. We appreciate everything you're doing, and I know you'll keep doing things, and when you see things, you'll be sure and let us know.
Well, thank you very much for having me. Thank you for the time.
To your crews, too.
Yes.
Okay. Item number 5, approve the order of the agenda.
Do you have any changes? Oh,
Anybody, because I am going to ask for one. Does anybody else have any? I would like to ask if anything gets pulled from the consent calendar, I would like to ask that it be slated later on in the agenda. I would say maybe between, between 14 and 15, if that's all right.
did that
And
include anything that was just slight change made, where they're going to just make?
to be pulled from the consent calendar.
We can approve that without polling.
Okay.
Or-
Yeah, that's
Okay.
fine.
All right, and then the city item number 13, the audited annual comprehensive financial report and the fiscal year. Let's see. Karina,
Yes, ma'am.
is Robert only doing 13A and you're doing 13B?
Robert's doing 11A, 13A, I'm doing 13B.
Okay, so
I'm still last.
I think we're okay. I wanted to get Robert going, but it's pretty quick, comes up here pretty quick. Okay, so then that brings us blue folder items. We already
Just have one, so you just need to receive and file that.
receive and file.
Yes,
Thank you.
please.
That was from the chief.
Motion to receive and file.
Thank you.
Any public comment on non-agenda
Are we
items?
going to all vote?
You want to just,
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Approve the order now?
if there's no dissension to what she requested, then you're okay.
For the blue folder, right?
For the order of the agenda.
Right. I thought we did that. Public comment on non-agenda items. Mr. Rain? Mr. Visco?
Yeah, Alfred Visco. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to make the June 10th meeting where the fire pit item came up for discussion. I did zoom in and heard it. There's a couple items. There seems to be some confusion about whether or not you're allowed to burn wood. There is no, as far as I know, there's no code that says you're not allowed to burn wood in a fire pit or in an outdoor fire place or even an indoor fireplace. And I didn't see that in anything that was in the documentation discussing it, and that's to my knowledge, that's the way it is. So the only time you're not allowed to burn wood is when it's a no-burn day, when the county says don't burn anything. Okay, so there seemed to be some confusion over that. Some people thought that there was a limitation on your allowance to burn wood in outdoor fire pits, outdoor fireplaces, which I was really shocked to learn we even have those in Rolling Hills. That's one item. There was another item, I heard one member say, gee, it would be nice if we had the codes themselves. All the codes were there. They were in the exhibits to the agenda items. So all the codes that the staff was able to find concerning these issues was there. And then the last thing, I believe there was going to be educational information and fire code requirements were going to be put in the blue newsletter. I'm just wondering where we are on that, because I haven't seen it. If it came in a blue newsletter, I missed it. That's it, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Visco.
And in response, Madam Mayor, it's coming up. We're getting it ready for the blue newsletter.
Charlie,
Charlie Rand. So has everybody seen the email I sent out, and Karina passed it out to you guys? If you haven't, I've got copies for anybody. So basically, at the last planning commission meeting, the applicant for 23 Crest Road, they were talking about the drainage and their retainment of water that comes on the site. And the problem is that they will never be able to retain enough water to encapsulate it and distribute it when it's a drier season. So we have the canyons of Rolling Hills go down to Rancho Palos Verdes and are causing landslides. Sure.
Oh, I'm sorry,
So I
Pat.
didn't have to look it
I'm
up.
sorry.
Or contributing to them. Anyways, our water, it's all water. So whether it comes from us or it comes from the RPV developments, the key is to pipe the water through to the ocean. So after the planning commission meeting, I went out and I met with the county engineers, Mike Dorda, Anthony Wong, and the two applicants, architects, and the end result was, it was a question that went to the county engineers because they can't require an applicant to put their water in pipes and go down the canyon. The request for pipes is something the county can approve, disapprove, contribute to, or do something about only if it's presented to them by an entity. So the county engineers said it has to come from the city and or the homeowners association. I have a meeting with the homeowners association. I'm on their agenda for Thursday morning with this letter, and I just sent this to you as sort of a preface to what I was going to talk about. So we all ultimately know that the county's the one who rubber stamps the water and what happens with the drainage and all that. Not rubber stamps, decides what is approved or disapproved. So what I'm asking is that the county agendize this item for discussion and put it forth, ideally with the purpose of putting it forth to the county to request the county pipes the water down, well, they should take it all the way to the ocean.
Charlie, just to be clear, you said the county put it on the agenda, you meant
I mean, the city.
Sorry, city, yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, yeah, thank you. So anyways, the city requested the county get involved with this, because the county will not do it on their own, apparently. The engineers said it needs to come from the entities. So I copied the city of RPV on the email that I sent to the association. I also copied Karina, who forwarded it to you guys. I got an email back from the city manager of RPV, which was copied to Karina and to Kristen. And they seem to be interested. If the three entities talk, if you guys can all get together and twist the county's arm and get this done, then we won't see the movement we see. An incredibly beautiful house can get built at 23 Crest, and ideally the Seaview and Portuguese Bend landslides come to a halt eventually. It's all water, and it's coming from us and it's coming from them, and it's creating nothing but havoc down there and for us. So that's my request, is that you consider this for your agenda item at some point next agenda. I don't know how you do that. I'm just asking that you do it.
Thank you, Charlie. Does anybody have any questions for Charlie? So here we can't really make any decisions or take any action, but I would like to let you know that the city storm drain committee is looking into the item. I know we have an ad hoc storm drain committee. I know you've met with that committee before.
Yeah.
The city staff is continuing to monitor the subject, and if we get any cross-jurisdictional drain, as you said, is going to take a lot of cooperation to get that done, and between the various public agencies. And we're going to ask the city manager to follow up to keep you apprised of this, but the ad hoc committee is looking at this. So when it will come on the agenda, I can't tell you that for sure, but we are meeting on it. We are trying to get it set up.
To agendize it or to?
Well, we'll see what happens. I mean, ultimately, I think it'll probably come to an agenda. I mean, I can't say that for sure. I don't know what the decision will be, how the conversation will go, but it's, the ad hoc committee is having discussions on this. We've been looking at the letters that you've had. You know I'm interested in this, as I'm sure the other council members are, and you're going to be kept in the loop on what's happening on that.
Well, thank you. I guess, just in closing, I will say, I don't care if it goes on the agenda. What I do care about is that the city asks the county to do something about it. So maybe it doesn't need to be
Right,
agendized.
right.
It just needs to get passed on to them.
And that's why I said I couldn't tell you when and if it would be coming on the agenda, but that it is being looked at, and we are trying to work out the cross-jurisdictional things. I can't really say
I
much
don't know the
more.
ins and outs, so I'm leaving that to you. I just hope that the cities talk and the association talks and the county gets involved and everybody's got the same goal, which is to stop the disaster.
I think that you will see that your wish is being looked at in the way you would want it looked at.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
How are you?
Hi,
Hi, Kathleen.
I'm Kathleen Hughes. I live at 13 Caballero. So for many years, I was a reporter for the Wall Street Journal, and I still freelance for them sporadically. And I have friends who live down in the Slide area. And I was watching what was happening in RPV, and I'm watching, people I know lose their homes and this dramatic nature of the Slide. So I proposed a story. I wrote the story, which involved interviewing the city council, the geologists, the residents. They assigned a photographer. They loved the story. They were going to make it a big cover story. And then 7 residents of Seaview, as I'm sure you know, filed a claim against Rolling Hills, claiming that we have inadequate drainage, which has contributed to the problem. I mean, clearly rainfall is the main problem, but we have stormwater runoff, which it seems to me it never really gets addressed. And it runs down Portuguese Bend Road, and it must run down Southfield. So in talking and now, the people I know down there, they've lost their, first they lost the water several times a day. Now their gas has been shut off. Now they have no electricity. And this is what it looks like when there's that much water that isn't addressed. Charlie was talking about the project on Crest, which is really important, and I back up everything Charlie said. But you zoom out, it just strikes me that this is our #1 issue as a city, an ethical issue, where it's kind of common sense that water runs downhill and that they not only have heavy rainwater, they have undoubtedly our rainwater, and people are losing their homes. And it seems to me, after interviewing all these geologists and about the geologists Mike Phipps, who works for RTV, the geologist who was hired to look at the homes that just suddenly slid into the canyon on Pear Tree, talking to geologists about the whole history of the peninsula and why we have the problems we do. It just seems to me this is our #1 issue, and Rolling Hills should have a geologist as a priority gauging how much water is running down, where is it going? And I've brought this up before, and I understand you were going to discuss this with all the cities together, but I now get notes from them, and I see what they're discussing and what they're saying at their meeting as they're losing their homes, and it says meeting with Rolling Hills has been postponed. Meeting with Rolling Hills has been postponed. So I'm hoping you can give me an update on I didn't know there was a storm drainage committee, but where we stand on that. And I realize that because 7 people have decided to sue Rolling Hills, that makes it a sensitive issue, but it doesn't get us around what to me is an immediate ethical issue of acting quickly and effectively. And it just seems it can't be that hard to figure out drainage. Like, there must be some way to collect it. I understand, and we've talked about this. You said it's hard to cross city lines. What do you do when you get to PV Drive South? There must be some way to collect rainwater so that we're not destroying other people's homes, potentially or actually.
Thank you, Kathleen. I'm not going to be able to give you an update on certain things. everybody understands this is a tragedy, what's happening in RPV. And you mentioned the possible litigation and so forth, that really does constrict what we can talk about. I'm going to refer to the city attorney if you think I should say so.
I should mention ethically that I can no longer do the story because I have a conflict of interest. When those people sued, I technically had a conflict of interest, so I dropped it and I declined to participate and help anybody else with any story. So I am speaking as a resident, not as a reporter. I should have said that at the beginning,
I
sorry.
understand, I appreciate you, and you and I had discussed that.
Right.
Discussed that previously.
Right, and so couple of clarifications, it's 12, not 7, 12 claims. As of today, there has been no lawsuit filed, albeit those government claims forms are a precursor for any lawsuit, so I just want to be sure everyone understands. As of right now, no active lawsuit. However,
Well, you can't sue the city to start, you file claims to start.
what I just said, so we only have the government claims, and echoing what Madam Mayor said, and I'm going to kind of crib from her previous comment to the previous speaker. This is, of course, a top priority for the city. This is not something that we take lightly, but bantering about and having a open discussion when the item's not on the agenda, facing those government claims is something I just can't advise you guys to do. They're looking into it. The ad hoc subcommittee is going to take a deeper dive. And yeah, that's it, Madam Mayor.
How do we get a report on what the storm drain committee is doing?
That is really up to the Storm Drain Committee on when they meet, what topics they discuss, and anything they report back to the City Council.
And for clarification, Kathleen, the Storm Drain Committee, the reason I said to Charlie that the Storm Drain Committee is looking at is that's a proposal for one storm drain that we're talking about. The Storm Drain Committee is an ad hoc committee. It has not been charged with looking at what's happening to the entire peninsula. Okay, so there's a different.
Or our impact on what's below us.
Yes, what is happening on the entire peninsula, whether it's our impact or what's happening down there. So we are looking at this time on the issue of, that came up from Charlie's letters that we have been looking at. I had even been talking to Charlie about that before the issues started happening so severely, the tragic issues down in RPD before that land movement started happening. So that is not at the Storm Drain Committee. That's an ad hoc committee that is not charged with
Can I
that.
propose that we hire a geologist, or that we hire a geologist who's already involved, so that?
You can propose anything you'd like.
I propose that. Thank you.
Any other comments from the public? Hearing none, let's move right along to the consent calendar. What are the wishes of? I would actually like to pull 8D like dog. And I have a quick question on 8F. I don't really want to pull it, but I have a quick question. And 8F is the tonnage report for the communal bins.
Yes, ma'am.
Do we know why there's been such a drop-off in the last, and if it requires a lot of discussion, we can talk about it later if it's something
Yeah.
quick.
I can, quickly, I can say that staff noticed the precipitous drop-off and reached out to Republic. Republic is trying to get us a more well-defined answer on if there was anything that they think, aside from less participation, and/or more successful precursors to that one, but we have requested some type of backup information, and hopefully maybe we can report out with our report next meeting.
Okay. Because if it's, we still have lots of vegetation that could be cleared and we could use the communal bins, but if it's dropping off by a half or a third, which it had, I would just be curious if that's a reporting thing or not. So thank you for that. So given that.
Madam Mayor, I just had a quick clarification. No need to pull it on the gift policy. That's item 8E. There's a slight typo in bullet point 5 that we'll fix. And then there is one clause I believe we should add to the final paragraph under types of gifts, that just talks about the city accepting non-restricted gifts. There's an estimated value under 1,000. After the term non-restricted, we should add the term non-cash. That was what I understand was the direction of city council. That being if someone is on, hopefully not, but moving out and they swing by city council and want to write a check for 500, Madam City Manager has the authority to accept that. If they try to drop off a used office chair that they say is valued at 500, that's when she can rely upon this policy and say, no, we're not going to take that.
So we can amend that
We
without,
can, just if.
without doing
yeah,
anything?
Correct.
Everybody else okay with that? Okay, so given that, the motion and second that was on the floor, can we go ahead and amend that to except for 8D like dog?
Why don't we just do 8D?
Because I would like to do that later.
I looked at the bills. Was there anything that was that big of a deal?
There's something I would like to discuss on it. So, with the corrections, with
Yep,
the
just so-
changes made,
That's all we need to say.
and pulling 8D, could the motion and second be amended for that?
I would be willing to amend my motion.
Same.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you very much. So excluded council items, we're going to move to that. Public hearings, first one, 11A. Public hearing to consider and adopt Resolution 1371, authorizing the placement of the solid waste service charges owed to Republic Services on the tax bill.
Okay, I think I'm going to take this. Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council. As you know, the city provides solid waste collection and disposal services to the city residents by contract. Republic Services is the contractor who provides those services. We have adopted a number of years ago, I'm not even sure how far back, a billing method whereby we utilize the services essentially of the County of Los Angeles to do the billing on our behalf and using the tax collection system for that purpose. Some cities do their own direct billing. They send out monthly bills. We choose to go with the county, and they just add this assessment to the property tax bill, and it's paid twice a year, just like regular property taxes. So as part of that, we have to have a public hearing, and we also have to adopt a resolution to place that parcel, those assessments, for refuse services on the tax roll. So this item today is really for your consideration and hopefully adoption of a resolution so that we can move forward with putting those assessments on the tax roll, which will come throughout the rest of the year. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for Robert from council? No. Hearing none, I would open this to public. Any comments from the public on this issue? Hearing none, I close the public comment portion. What are the wishes of the council?
I would move that we adopt resolution 1371, placing the sanitation service charge on the County of Los Angeles tax roll.
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. Thank you very much. Thank you, Robert. Let's see, 11A. No old business. New business. Accept and approve the city, this is 13A. Accept and approve the City of Rolling Hills audited annual comprehensive financial report for fiscal year ended June 30, 2023.
Yes.
Shouldn't that be 2024?
No. 22, 23.
Oh, 23, you're right. Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of council. I didn't introduce myself before. I'm Robert Samario. And so, yeah, we're here to present to you what's called the Annual Comprehensive Financial Report for the fiscal year ended June 30, 2023. And we're here really to have you receive and file this report, but we're going to give you a report, kind of highlighting the results of the city's finances for that year ended June 30, 2023. It is an audited set of financial statements by our auditors. The reason we have to have these financial statements audited is because it's required by the State Controller's Office, and I suspect your mini code also requires it. As you know, we present to you quarterly reports on the finances, if you will. But those are really just focused on how are we doing from a budgetary perspective, how our revenue is doing relative to budget, how our expenditures doing relative to the budget. The financial report that's part of this packet is really designed to give you a sense of what's the financial health of the city in measured in the same way that it's measured in the private sector, and whether the city's financial health has increased or improved or deteriorated over the last year. So a big difference between what we present to you on a quarterly basis, which is just a budgetary sort of perspective, versus the financial statements, which are about financial health of the city. I'm not sure how many of you had a chance to look at it in detail, but there are essentially 5 components to the ACFR, we call it. And one is, I think, probably the most important part of the document. It's called the Management's Discussion and Analysis. It's something that I write. It's referred to as the MD&A. And it's sort of like a budget transmittal, if you will, where it summarizes all the numbers that are being presented, which, of course, it's a lot of numbers, very dense report. So this gives you kind of a layman's perspective on the finances. It tells the story of how did we do, what's our financial condition, and so forth. There is what are called the entity-wide financial statements, and we'll go through this in a moment, but it's really consolidating the city as a whole to show you kind of the financial condition. And then we have the individual fund financial statements, which you're more used to. It's the general fund and all the restricted funds, and it shows each of those funds in terms of how they did this past year. There's footnotes, and then there are just combining statements in the back. So some entity-wide financial highlights. So about 15, 20 years ago, the entity that establishes standards for accounting and financial reporting is called GASB. In the private sector, it's FASB. So it's the Governmental Accounting Standards Board. They established standards for accounting and financial reporting. And about 20 years ago, they chose to require cities and states and counties to present financial statements in a whole different way. And the way they wanted us to do it was to try to mirror the private sector. In the past or prior to that, financial statements really had no, a reader couldn't really tell the financial condition of an entity or a city. It was all budgetary information and primarily, and it was just a short-term focus, but they felt like the readers, the users, the community needed to really know the financial condition of an entity in the same way you might evaluate an Apple if you're looking to invest in that company or something like that. So these financial statements are prepared in the same way that the private sector, publicly held companies are prepared. And so it does provide you a true measure of the financial condition of the city at a point in time, which is June 30, 2023. So this lays out into 2 columns. One is governmental activities. That's everything, primarily the general fund, but all the restricted funds. And then the business activities, some cities have a lot, we have one. That's the refuse fund. But essentially what it tells us at the bottom is the net position. That's really a measure of our health. When you think about your own sort of finances, how do you measure your own personal wealth? You would take all your assets and you subtract everything, all your liabilities, and the net of that is your wealth. And here it's our financial position. And as you can see, at least in the governmental activities column, which is primarily the general fund, we have $7.9 million, of which about $5 million is unrestricted, that we could spend on whatever purposes and appropriate for whatever purposes. There's $2.2 million that's restricted. That's primarily, again, the monies we collect from Prop A, Prop C, Measure A, Measure M, Measure R. But the $5 million is essentially the amount of money we have in the general fund that's made up of monies that we have sort of set aside for whatever, one-time purposes. But it's also the monies we set aside per city policy for contingencies/emergencies. So, from my perspective, relative to kind of other agencies, our financial position and the amount of money we have in reserves are pretty strong. As you know, our challenge is really more about funding long-term capital needs, but on an operational basis, I think we can say we're in pretty good financial health. And then this is the revenues and the expenditures, again, measured in the same way. I'm going to focus on the first column of numbers because, again, it's really the general fund that we're speaking to there. I've highlighted the bottom. This is kind of, again, the idea is how did we do during the year? And as you can see, we improved our financial position by $88,000. Not a lot of money, but at least we're not going in the wrong direction. This just tells us that our financial condition is good and we're kind of going in the right direction. We've added $88,000 to our financial position. in this past year. So the general fund, which is, again, is our main operating fund, these are the revenues in detail showing the adopted budget and what our final revenues, audited numbers that ended up at the end of the year last year, and what the variances are. For the most part, we're pretty well in line with, what we expected. Some variances up and down. Some notable items are property taxes. I was telling you all along that we're going to come up short, and we did a little bit. Our property transfers taxes also fell short of the budget because of what's happened with interest rates. We kind of projected that and predicted that. But at the bottom line, we did about $145,000 better than what we budgeted, so that's good news. And on the expenditure side, I won't get into individual departments because we've spoken a lot about those, but I just wanted to tell you that you could see the variance on the far right. We spent $885,000 less than what was budgeted. And we had some savings, like in the planning area where we had turnover in staff, but we also were still dealing with budgeted numbers that weren't really well vetted. I think 2023-24 was the first year that we could say that, yeah, those numbers were looked at carefully, and we're not going to be expected to see those kind of variances in this current year we're in that just ended. But last year, the numbers, I think, in some areas were inflated, particularly in planning, that I think led to that variance. But this is really, I think, the most important schedule that tells us the real story. The middle column of numbers is really what's important because, what we established our budget was just a budget and based on estimates, but what really transpired is right down the middle. We had almost $2.9 million of revenues, and our operating expenditures, those are things that are ongoing versus capital, were 2.5. So we did have an operating surplus of $368,000. So that's good. Again, revenues did better than we thought, and we had a substantial savings on the expenditure side. But we did spend $1 million for capital, and that was by design, and we know that comes from our unrestricted reserves. So we did end up using reserves of $645,000, again, intentionally. It doesn't represent anything going wrong with our budget. We are structurally sound. But we are spending money for capital appropriately, which is going to then eventually just draw down those reserves into the future. The audit results, so the auditors spent a lot of time looking at our numbers and with the goal of issuing an opinion as to whether our financial statements can be relied upon, whether they're not going to say they're either 100% accurate or not. They're just saying that in all material respects that they present the financial condition of the city and the results of operations. And we've received a clean opinion, so there's no qualification or modification to that opinion. And they also look at our internal controls. They don't do a full study of internal controls. That's not their goal. The reason they look at it is because they want to be able to determine how much actual audit test work do we need to do. If they are in a city where internal controls are very weak, they will have to do a lot more test work in the back end to make sure that the numbers are good. If they find that their internal controls are strong, it really reduces, they can have a lot more confidence that the numbers are going to be good, so they can do less test work. And for us, they did do their study of internal controls as part of their audit, and they found no significant deficiencies or material weaknesses, which is good, which I would expect. And in fact, they didn't even have any what I would refer to as housekeeping items. Most of the time, you'll see that nothing material or significant, but if you can just do, you might want to do this or that to strengthen your internal controls. They had no comments whatsoever, so I feel good about that. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions from council? B?
Yeah, I mean, I do bring this up every year about when we go through an audit, that is. And because of the fact that, in my job as a DA, I've handled fraud cases, I did do a deep dive, so I wanted to confirm with you, Robert, because there's been various articles from the Journal of Accountancy and from the Journal of Forensic and Investigative Accounting, as well as the City Managers Association for the country, that talk about how the annual audit is not an adequate indicator of whether there's a risk assessment been done for fraud. And that local municipal governments are targets for fraud. And they, especially now with the advent of AI, where there's a lot of impersonations of people and documents that look very accurate, and cyber security issues, there needs to be a little bit more of like a risk assessment in that. So do you have any, obviously, do you agree with what I just said as far as the risk assessment, that is being done, because the audit isn't intended to do that? And
Yeah, I would agree that as I kind of stated, the purpose of the review of internal controls by the auditor is not to issue an opinion on internal controls and internal control systems. It's to determine how much audit test work they need to do. But, they do some fraud assessment work, because they have to now by new auditing standards. And in my opinion, they do a fair amount of review of internal controls. And what they also do is they do compliance testing. And what I mean by that is that they will look at whatever documents we have. They interview staff, and they'll say, okay, tell me how you go about doing things and conducting business, and how do you review transactions, who's reviewing them, how often, and things like that. But they don't just take our word for it. They have to then look at transactions, and like they might look at a list of accounts, checks that went out, and say, was there an approval of those by at least more than one person? So they make sure that we are complying with our own procedures, prescribed procedures. So, but again, they don't do a full study. You would have to kind of contract for somebody to do a full study to really assess your internal controls if you had a concern about them. But they do a fair amount of work as part of their audit.
well, I just want, because every opinion letter we get has the same statement that their audit that is not being done for the purpose of expressing any opinion on the effectiveness of the city's internal control. And in fact, they are not expressing an opinion on its effectiveness. And they said material weaknesses or significant deficiencies may exist that were not identified. So I'm just saying that with respect to that, I know for myself, I'm not saying we shouldn't approve the audit. That is not my purpose of this, because to me, it's a totally different situation.
Yeah.
But that we should look into it. We have a joint powers insurance authority that would pay out if there was some kind of fraud or problem that required us to be liable for something that happened for not having good internal control. So that would be my desire. And there's a lot of things that in articles that indicate that the internal audit that is done standard is not an adequate indicator of a fraud risk assessment that would help a city make sure they avoid such occurrences.
Yeah.
So are you asking that we should engage with an auditor to test for?
It may not be an auditor. I mean, that could be one way of doing it. But from what I understand, there's risk assessments that we could get through the Joint Powers Insurance Authority, or there's other things online that talk about what kind of internal controls you should look at, and making sure you have dual people, like there's not the same person who's reviewing the accuracy of a bill and also approving the bill or paying the bill. Things of that nature. These are common things to make sure there's checks and balances, especially with a small a city like ours. It's very easy. Someone could make an account look like it's the actual payee, but it's really to a different bank account, and they just slightly changed the name, and they're sending it to the wrong payee. So
What B's asking about, they're already looking at that, right? That's pretty low-level stuff.
No.
I mean, you can get, I don't know what the JPIA would provide to us, or what the cost would be associated. I remember asking this question before, and it came up to, well, how much money do you want to spend?
Well, I mean, obviously you could go Cadillac treatment, but I'm talking like just some basic things that could be helpful to review. And just having staff look into that, and we could bring us back some cost estimates. Perhaps JPIA, because they'll be covering the liability, they may have some free services or very minimal services that they would offer just to do a review and make some suggestions.
I would like to suggest that we continue this discussion. If there's going to be a discussion on something you would like to consider having the council take some action on until after we open
Sure.
for public comment,
Okay.
unless there's any other questions here. Any public comment on this issue? Arm candy? Okay, come up, please. He didn't know that nickname was gonna stick with him forever, did he, when he made that, when he tossed that comment out?
Well, actually, that's my alias, I guess, now.
Let's give your real
My
name.
actual name is Daniel Schrader, and I live at 54 Saddleback Road. Your name was Robert? Yeah, I want to thank you very much for that report. It's really nice. It was laid out really clear, and everything seems like it come up in the right column. You know, as far
That's
as
why he gets paid the
coming
big
up with
bucks.
a little positive money left over. Hopefully, we don't spend it on too many audits. But thank you very much. That's all I had.
Daniel. Mr. Visco?
Alfred Visco, 15th Century. Well, I'm not as clear on what was presented as the eye candy person is. So as I understand it, and I tried to go back to the budget and try to line it up. So as I understand the presentation, we had $145,000 more in revenue than what we anticipated in the budget. And we spent $885,000 less than what we anticipated spending in the budget. Isn't anyone concerned about that kind of discrepancy in the budget? No, nobody's concerned. Yet the net, the revenue over expenses on the very first schedule showed an increase of only $103,000. So that is where my question lies. If we had more, $145,000 more in revenue and spent $885,000 less, why does that not this one, but the very first schedule that was put up show about $103,223 more? Right, 103,000, total 103,223 net position of increase. So is this because we expended capital expenditures? Is that why that number's only 103,000? That's my question. So, and if, I think I understood what Robert said pretty clearly. We had 145,000 more in revenue and 885,000 less in expenses. So why do we only go up 103,000 roughly? That's my question.
Robert, you want to?
Be happy to answer questions. So there's kind of a two-part question or answer to this. So this schedule here, when I introduced it, I mentioned that it's prepared in a different manner than we think about in terms of our funds, individual funds, and some of the schedules we showed after this. This is prepared what's called on an accrual basis. And so it's a completely different accounting basis than what we use to present sort of the results of operations for the general fund and other funds. So as an example,
Excuse me, let him finish. Oh, I'm sorry.
an example, and I think. Okay. So one of the things, for example, you won't see on this schedule is capital expenditures because those are capitalized and depreciated. So you wouldn't see those expenditures here. So it's just on a different basis. So you're not going to, these numbers here are truly a, a measure of economic, health and all that stuff and on an accrual basis. The other schedules are different. But the other thing to point out is that you can't really look at just the variance to the budget, because if you just focus on the kind of the horizontal approach, it's going to end up being confusing to you, because the first column is the amended budget. It tells you that we expected that we were going to end the year at $284,000 as a deficit, an operating deficit, and that we would spend $1.4 million of capital. That was the budget. But as you could see, like on the capital line, we only spent $1 million because these capital projects are multi-year in nature. So we're going to spend the rest of those dollars, the variance to 375, we're going to spend that in this year and the year and maybe beyond. So that variance is really about, you know, the capital portion. On the operating portion, yeah, we ended up with a surplus, you know, variance of 652, but that's because we had, our budget reflected a lot more, a use of reserves, and then what really transpired. So you kind of have to look at it sort of both ways. But the middle column, as that's what I was saying, is the important column is how did our real revenues do? So we ended up with $2.9 million of revenues. How much did we spend? And we could talk about why we spent less than the budget, but we spent 2.5. And so at the end of the year with an operating surplus of 368. And that's important. But then we also spent $1 million for capital. So, you know, that's really the important numbers that we have to look at. And I would compare the 368 to the 102 or the previous schedule. But it's just that's a different basis. So you can't really mix comparing budgeted variances with actual results because you'll get confused. You get confused because it doesn't really tell you the full story that way. You really have to focus once you get to the end of the year at the actual results. And again, explaining why revenues, you know, did what they did and why expenditures did what they did. But those are the real numbers that we should go with, and that's what really transpired. And I think that's just the important numbers to look at.
So, Mr. Fisco, I think when you mentioned earlier, and you said, is it because, was this figure different? Was it because of the capital? So.
Well, the point he made from the first item was it's based on an accrual basis. That's the real difference. The accrual basis, which I hate.
I understand, but I just want to make sure that you got an answer. Thank you.
Accrual basis are accountants, and I hate the accrual basis.
Any other comments from the public? Hearing none, I'll close the public portion of the meeting. Wishes of the council. B, did you want to continue? Do you have an ask somewhere here?
Yes, I mean, I would approve the audit, but ask that we have direction for the staff to bring us back information about what the cost would be on various types of investigation relating to our review for fraud checks, so that we would have a fraud risk assessment of some sort and what it would cost, you know, to engage in that and what we would get for the cost.
Before I ask for a motion on that, any other comments to Councilmember Derringer's questions?
Can I ask for clarification? So what you typically get when you hire, it's typically an auditor. It doesn't have to be our auditors, but you would hire an auditor. And there's some firms who may not be CPAs that do this kind of work, but the logical consultant or contractor you would want to go with, I think, is a CPA firm that does municipal audits, because that's what their specialty is. What they will look at is essentially the same as our auditors do, but in a more comprehensive and more detailed manner. They're going to look at who's approving transactions. Are they being approved? Are they being done timely? I say that because I don't know that you're going to get a firm that's going to say to you, we're going to look for potential fraud. They're just going to evaluate your internal controls and say, is there a potential, or what's the likelihood that you could have things going on that you wouldn't know about, fraud, embezzlement, or just mistakes that occur on a regular basis. So I just want to make sure we're clear on the scope of what we're trying to do here and what we're looking to cost out in terms of the services we be getting.
Is the type of accountancy that Councilmember Derringer may be asking about, would that be like a forensic accounting, or?
Yeah, again, I don't, you can hire whatever you want.
Right.
I think what you're looking for is have some independent assurance. If you felt that, if you all had a collective concern that there's potential, or you weren't really sure we had good internal controls, then you would want to hire somebody to look at your internal controls and just, what the auditors do now, but just more comprehensively and with a more fine-tooth comb. They will probably not issue an opinion, as you might, what they'll do is they'll say, we are going to perform certain procedures, and we're going to look at these things, and we're going to tell you if we find anything. But they really, most firm, I don't think any CPA firm will give you an opinion on the internal controls, because that's too risky. I think they'll go through a set of procedures, and they'll agree to those and give you any findings about, what they found and any recommendations based on those tests, the work that they did. But it's, again, no different than what our auditors do. It's just probably, if the auditors look at 40%, they might do a 95% look at everything. But we can certainly do that, but it's not going to be focused on fraud, or it's not going to be a forensic review. It's just going to look at all, how we approve transactions and making sure there's no potential for wrongdoing or for mistakes.
I actually have a question. I have a couple. First of all, I have not heard anything from JPIA that they encourage, that they're saying, but we see issues out there, we are suggesting that the cities do that. I'm not saying that they haven't said that they have services available if we needed, but I have not, I don't know if any of the other council members have heard anything like that from JPIA, that they think that this is an issue that cities need to be taking any action on right now. Have you heard that?
They have been talking a lot about different things, ways in which cities can be defrauded. Obviously, cybersecurity is one way.
I understand. We're talking about, if we could, just stick with this issue of our internal processes for our bill paying and financial management here. Have you seen or heard anything from JPIA on that? As a red alert, this is something that you guys, we're seeing this in cities. Are you seeing that? Have you heard that?
They've talked generally about it, but nothing as far as anything specifics, but they've talked about that's something that is important.
And you also bring up, thank you, you also bring up the fact that every year you're a little uncomfortable, or the statement that goes along with our audit that says, this audit does not include this, and this, and so forth.
Yeah.
And yes, that's a statement that is there every year. I would say that statement is not unusual here. Those of us that have had private businesses have seen that statement on any annual audits that we get. I think it would be kind of like, to put in your language, there are certain things that are put in when you have a legal document that are, little disclaimers. So, that's the way those are written. I have not seen anything that gives me any concern that what we have in this small of an office, I think our staff knows who our vendors are. If there was a check that was cut to another account, vendor that we did know that we were getting an invoice from, but somehow if it got cut to another bank, that vendor is going to be coming to us in 30 days or something saying, where's my check? So I feel pretty comfortable here on this. I don't know if you would like to make.
So, can I?
Yes.
So, these numbers are not gigantic, and honestly, nobody wants to not look into potential fraud, but the reality is, you got them right in front of you right now. We get the bill, it has the bill, and we sign it. We sign every single check.
Yeah,
Two of us do.
just
And
for-
we have the bill right there. It's right in front of you.
I understand.
And there's the bill from the vendor and the amount, and we sign it. I don't know what to say. You look at the bill and you see it.
Well, there's a
So
lot
I
of
don't really see what
SCHs.
you're talking about.
Okay.
And then the other issue is, back to the annual audit, you can see that we had a $368,000 surplus. And I can tell you again, it goes up every year. We have these silly thing that looks like we're gonna have a major deficit, and it scares everybody, and it never happens. And then we have this big actual $368,000 surplus. I think this current one is gonna be closer. I looked at this year's, it's gonna be much better. I don't think we're gonna scare everybody like we do. But it happens every year, and I don't know why government accounting does it. But it shows we have no structural deficit. We have no ongoing deficit, unlike the state, unlike a lot of cities that have structural deficits. We don't. We're not that stupid. We actually have a lot more money. I always say if that was my bank, I'd like that. For the city, you know, we might have some big expenses this year, drains and things that we need that. Otherwise, I'd actually like, as you know, to cut down, contribute that towards people's trash bills, which we did for a lot of years. But I suspect we're gonna have some big bills with drainage and things like that. But I think we can say we did well. And I don't think we need to spend a lot of extra money on outside accounting because we literally look at the bill personally and sign it personally. I don't see why, I know where that money got spent.
And to clarify, I'm not asking for additional accounting necessarily. I mean, obviously, that's one form of doing it. I'm just asking for information to be brought back, that's all. For it to say, okay, does this, what would this cost? Does JPIA provide this as a service, or would they have a team that would do this to look over things to see if there could be improvements made?
And that sounds like, that sounds great, as long as it's not gonna take a ton of staff time to find out, and as long as it's not gonna cost a lot of money. If there's something they offer, boy, that's great, why not? But if it's gonna take 50 or 100 hours of staff time, we're gonna find out they really don't have anything, or nothing, it's not gonna cost us a giant amount of money, then I would vote against it.
Yeah,
But if
and
it's
at this
simple and
point,
doesn't cost much,
yeah.
fine.
No, I would agree. I'm not talking about something that's gonna cost a ton of staff time. If they have something that would be, just to have a review that wouldn't cost that much, I just think it's good to have it, because they make it very clear that there's a lot of problems that occur in most local governments that have this happen to them. And of course, I'm not saying there's anything going on that I
understand,
believe.
But it doesn't help having another ice. If it's not gonna cost a lot of money or take a lot of staff time, I'd be in favor. But if it's gonna, you know, but otherwise,
Yeah.
I don't know that it's necessary, because like I said, we sign them, we see the bill. It says water, it says electricity, and we sign it.
Yeah, well, I don't know how we're gonna know in advance how much staff time it's gonna
Right.
take, so, you know, I'm sure our staff is very accommodating, and they'll probably do more than we ask them, and then more than we want them, so, you know, you said 50 or 100, even, I don't know, 15 or 20 sounds
That's
like a
what I
lot
would
of,
like.
lot of
I
time,
agree.
so, I wish this information, or maybe it is available on the JPI website, so staff doesn't have to spend too much time looking into this, but I support what you're saying, I just don't, I think, you know, even though the audit that we're talking about here has the disclaimers, I haven't seen anything like that that doesn't have the same kind of disclaimer. They just, you know, they're trying to limit the risk, you know, by saying that they're not guaranteeing anything. I know they're looking at it. I know when my company's books get looked at, you know, just like you said, they ask a lot of questions, and if the answers come quickly and easily, you know, they move on to the next big thing, looking for something. So there's a considerable level of examination done that would detect fraud. They're just saying that's not their focus. Their focus is on the financial part of it. But I know that they would bring to our attention if there's anything, and the fact that they didn't even make a comment about our internal controls, you know, that's pretty impressive, especially with a small staff, because it's harder to implement internal controls when you only have, you know, a few persons in the on the staff that you have to distribute the duties. Like, you know, one person gets the statement, and another person, well, somebody writes the checks, another person, you know, reviews the statement. You're supposed to separate those duties, and there's, you know, a dozen others that you're supposed to have. It gets harder when you have a condensed or a concentrated staff like ours. So, anyway, I'm talking about this more than I would want the staff to be spending
Right.
on the time. So,
But our time sheet.
Yeah, and I just didn't answer that. I only brought that up because Robert was saying, oh, well, they went in and they looked at all this, and I've never seen them bring up in an audit. I've seen numerous of these as we've been on council. None of them have said, oh, you could do this, you could do that. And they never proffer anything. They just simply say, we found nothing that really was, that we,
Have good internal
Yeah.
controls. So B, do you,
Every auditor we've ever had, every accountant firm we've ever had, it's always the same.
are you going to would you like to make a
but just make a
motion?
motion that we approve the audit, that we ask staff to bring back some information as to what exists for.
Can you separate those two,
Okay,
please?
that's fine. I make a motion to approve the audit, and then we can do the second motion.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, your second item,
Okay, the
please?
second item that we just asked to briefly, not take up too much staff time, but we just investigate what it would take for a fraud risk assessment, whether JPIA offers that, and what other options are available. And,
You want to give a not to exceed hours?
sure, what would be a reasonable amount, do you think?
A half an hour.
Hour?
Not to exceed 20 hours, how's that?
Okay, that sounds
Then
reasonable.
I would second.
That's to investigate the process.
That's to-
And to bring it back, yeah.
Oh, I hope not. Okay.
Okay, I would second that.
Thank you.
Let's do a roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Wilson?
Yes.
Councilmember Black?
Yes.
Councilmember Derringer?
Yes.
Mayor Murphy?
No. Staff, you're clear on your direction on that?
Yes, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Robert. So Robert, we get to send you home now on your long journey. Thank you. 13B, adopt resolution number 1372, approving the updated fiscal year. No, that's not it. Public employees retirement system requirement.
Good afternoon,
Good morning, good evening.
Madam Mayor and members of City Council. The item before you, staff is requesting that the City Council consider adopting resolution number 1372. As you mentioned, the California Public Employees Retirement System requires that public agencies have a governing board, City Council, adopt and formalize a pay schedule that aligns with the employees that are currently working at their organization. They do this to ensure that we are increasing transparency, most importantly, transparency, but also to ensure that staff are being paid within the approved and authorized salary ranges. So in this particular item, what I'm bringing before you is the salary schedule that has been posted every year at the end of every fiscal year. There are a consideration of a cost of living adjustment effective the following fiscal year, July 1. Those salary schedules are updated and posted on the website, which complies with one of the components, was to make it publicly available. However, the second component is requesting that the City Council adopt and approve said salaries. Since my time and my tenure of being here, I've identified that the city has not formally adopted a salary schedule. So what this does, it memorializes the salary schedules that are currently available to employees that are adopted and approved by City Council. And it allows that if an employee leaves the organization, they can be paid within that salary range. Nothing more and nothing less, but we're within that range. Moving forward, to ensure that this is being handled appropriately, it'll come before the City Council at the time of the budget adoption. So really and truly, this is to ensure that we are in compliance with the California Public Employees Retirement System, CalPERS. If we get audited, they will see that this was approved before the City Council. Did you want to add anything?
I had a question. Where did the low end of these salaries come from? Where did that number come from?
There may have been a salary study that was conducted prior to me being here, and whatever they utilized as the mean or the medium of those salary ranges is possibly how they determine what the minimum and the maximum of that range is.
I'd like to modify those numbers. I'd like to drop the lower end on each one. Because if we're doing a new hire, I don't necessarily want to hire them at those numbers.
So
Yeah, do you want?
Sure.
maybe I
Go.
have just some suggestions on that.
Well, and can we wait on that until, on
Right.
suggestions? until-
After public comment,
After
yeah, this is
public
time
comment,
for
yeah.
questions, right, yeah.
I'm not gonna adopt this.
I've got a question.
Yes, sir.
Well, specifically, code enforcement officer, that's a contract position, right?
Correct.
So why is it listed here as a,
It is so traditionally, when you have a position that at one point was housed within the organization, you would indicate as that position being not an authorized position. Although it was in-house at one point, it's authorized as 0 and it's contracted. Let's say in the foreseeable future, you decided to bring that position back in. There is no need to do an entirely new salary schedule or conduct a classification. You have one that already exists on the books and you leave it there. If in fact in the future you decide to bring that position in-house.
okay, so Robert, for example, his position wouldn't be in here because we didn't have that.
At an in-house position, correct. Right.
Is there a benefit to leaving or a requirement that once we've ever had somebody in-house, that have to stay there, other than that you say we wouldn't have to do another study? But if you completely took it off,
It would just,
you're not bound
you are,
by
no,
whatever
you just
is there.
remove it. You remove it from the salary schedule.
What is our current staff head count?
6.5,
Okay, so that's what's reflected with the columns that have 1 in the,
yes.
okay.
Including me is a 6,
Yes.
and then the half is a part-time employee.
I understand that to be fully staffed, right?
That's correct, sir. We are fully staffed.
Until what, 2 weeks from now?
Until one of our employees goes to law school, and then I gotta recruit again. Abby.
B, any questions?
Yes, just to clarify, in earlier conversation, the numbers that are put in here were simply numbers that were listed currently on the website,
Yes, ma'am.
but you're not sure where these numbers came from.
It could have been conducted through a salary schedule.
And they could have been, we have occasionally over the past, when we've been hiring at new positions, we have done studies, we would like, let's say, look and see what planning directors throughout the city or in the area have been getting. So we've done little independent ones, and I think those might have been put in there.
But you found a source for these numbers somewhere.
No.
These are what we currently have posted and available in our salary tables. So prior to me coming on board, these salary ranges that were available. So when I hired somebody, I utilized the salary schedule that the finance department had in the previous years and whatever's been posted, so.
Yeah, so with regard to that, I know that there are, obviously, when you do a study, and some of the times we've hired somebody, it's been more of a situation where we need to get somebody, and this person won't come for this salary, so we have to bump it up, and things were done incrementally. So I don't know that some of these monthly minimums, could have been something that we had to get for a particular employee. So I would more propose that, because just put it out there.
Okay, so this was for question. Has your question been answered, and your proposals we can discuss after we hear from the public?
Pretty much, that we don't have that information.
Thank you.
what they- based
Any
on.
items, any comments from matters of the public? Our members of the public, yeah, everything's on this item. Open agenda was over in the beginning, so we're going item by item. So any public comment on this agenda item right now? Hearing none, I'm going to close that. All right, Councilmember Derringer?
Yes, I know when the mayor and I were serving on the Personnel Committee, we had some discussions about some of the issues relating to this and how we are to consider what the range would be for our city and so forth. I think it may be helpful before we as a council, because what I understand from the city attorney is that whatever we put here and we approve it as a city council, we can't go below that. And so we are basically stuck with those numbers. But these are numbers that we don't necessarily know how they were derived. So I would be proposing that we, and I'm willing to volunteer myself, have an ad hoc committee to try to talk with the city manager, try to see where if these numbers make sense.
Just cut them down.
Well, I do believe there are, I believe there are requirements on how you can do that.
You can pay whatever you want.
No,
You can have a minimum and a maximum, and I'd rather have the broadest possible spectrum.
by the way, I do believe that the Personnel Committee, I don't think Personnel Committee isn't that a standing committee, not an ad hoc?
Well, if we're talking about this particular issue for this purpose to determine what the basis is for these things, that's why it would be more of an ad hoc, because it's specialized to this issue.
I do believe that there are some requirements, and I know this sounds really silly, I have no idea what the recent Supreme Court decision might have to do with this, but a requirement of CalPERS, which is telling us what we can and cannot, what we must do with how we handle what our salary, what changes that we can make on our salary. I don't know, they're not a.
No, CalPERS is specifically saying you need to approve a salary schedule and have it, because we haven't had a salary schedule.
Legislators.
Right, and so I believe that you're talking about the.
I'm trying to get wonky
No, I
here,
understand, but
but-
you're talking about the Chevron example and
Yeah,
the
yes,
ability for
yes.
administrative agencies. So
Yeah.
I am looking at the regulation right now and the requirement for which we post a pay range. I see very little in terms of CalPERS doing creative interpretation on this. It says you have to post a pay range, the range has to list the thing, so point taken, but I think that they're in.
I'm trying anything I can here.
I'm putting on a pay range, but I just need to be broader.
And I would point out that under the regulations that were cited, the 570.5 of the regulations in our ordinance, proposed ordinance, when the failure for us to post it just means that CalPERS then, in its discretion, may determine the amount that's considered to be a pay rate for someone who's retiring. That's what they would do if we don't have it posted. And I'm not saying that that's a reason not to post it, but I'm just saying there's no immediate rush that we have to get this on the books right away. We have something listed now. It's on the website, so that would provisionally seem to satisfy CalPERS. But I just want to make sure it's accurate and that we know what the basis is, and we as a council think this is a fair estimate for what we want to post. And maybe whether you even want to keep it on the website. You don't have to put it on the website. It has to be publicly available. When website is one way.
So I think there's a lot of questions around this, and I know I had asked Karina some questions about it earlier, about us being able to change it. I believe there are some certain requirements, we just don't get to change them. If you wanted to have the Personnel Committee take a look at what's involved, what we really have to do versus what CalPERS suggests that we do, what would the implications be if we didn't do it?
You know, in all the times we've hired people over all these years, there's not a CalPERS requirement at our minimum salaries. There's never been a minimum salary requirement. It's what we can get somebody to work for.
Right.
But there's not a requirement from CalPERS, you cannot have a minimum salary below this number. That is not, that was never.
I understand that.
I don't understand. CalPERS doesn't require, is that what you said?
They have not, there's never been a requirement that this could be it has to be your absolute minimum salary.
Well, and.
We've not been able to hire anybody, but.
Yeah, no, I don't know, okay, I don't know about your company, but I know that we had to follow this template here, and I don't know how public and private, line up in this specific situation, but I know we had to go through that.
You have to actually hire based on what CalPERS tells you is the lowest.
No, not CalPERS, that's what I'm saying. I'm talking about my private business.
Right.
But I don't know which agency manages or monitors this. Again, I don't know if the private requirement has anything to do with the public. I can't say that. But we did have to come up with salary ranges.
We have to have a range.
Yeah.
And
I
so
don't mind, but
there's a range, there's a bottom.
Right, but you can put the bottom wherever you want.
Right.
And I don't want the bottom too high
Right.
in case we take someone that we really, let's say they have no skill and experience, but we think they're a good person, they probably can do well. I'm not gonna pay them in a range that I would pay someone, you know, with more experience. I don't care about the top. I just want the bottom of it.
Okay, well,
And if we don't have a position, I don't want it here. So if code enforcement officer, get rid of it, you know?
What's the urgency to pass this?
Go ahead.
So that CalPERS regulation does state that it should be done at the end of every fiscal year. As Councilmember Derringer did state, I wouldn't necessarily categorize the consequences of dire, but the regulation says what it says. And as Madam City Manager posited earlier, sometimes CalPERS does audit cities. I have no reason to believe they're going to audit us. However, if they were, this would undoubtedly come up and be an issue.
Well, if we were to refer this to committee, it could add some time.
Which is fine. Doesn't matter. We haven't had it for
Who's on the personnel
50,
committee?
60 years that the city's been existing. It hasn't been done.
I'm gonna look here, the last time we did it, it was, let's see, committee, personnel,
Looks like-
Derringer and
And
Piper.
Yeah.
Jeff's not here, I hate to dump anything on him when he's not here.
Do that when
That'll
nobody's
teach
here.
him.
But
He likes broad salary ranges also.
I would like, I would make a motion that, I'd like to talk about it when Jeff is here. Or do you want to just go ahead and assign it to do we want to take a vote to assign? Okay, so let's define what we want to assign. Am I doing anything wrong yet? Okay. Let's put some parameters around what we want to do. We just want to say, look into the,
They should review the salary schedule and determine if we should omit positions for which we don't actually have anybody.
okay, number one, yes. I think we could make that decision right now.
It's here.
Yeah, I know, but
And
let's
it's got a
take it off.
salary schedule,
Well,
okay?
Well, you can remove,
Yes.
you can remove it.
I can do that now.
If we all
Make the
agree on that, I would make a motion that I really wished we had code enforcement in-house. In a perfect world, I would rather have an in-house person. But it doesn't look like that we're going that way, and if we do, we can always add it in at that time, so
Does that require a council motion to do that?
I'm
Or
gonna,
just to get it on this list?
to get it,
Back on the list?
add it back?
For not just the.
Yes.
code enforcement,
Yes, correct.
Yeah.
It would require,
Staff to come back and present to you that, seeking authorization to add a position.
Before we hire the person? I mean, how?
That's correct.
how-
Yes, you would not hire anyone until you have an authorized and approved position.
But we wouldn't be authorizing them if it hadn't been discussed at council first. Council wouldn't be a surprise to us.
Yeah.
We could give the direction that it would be brought in, and by bringing it in-house, that could put it there.
All by council approval.
So I would make a motion that we remove the code enforcement officer.
Second.
In favor?
Aye.
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 Madam Mayor, there is the senior planner position,
Senior planner.
senior planner.
Actually, because that one might, I'm gonna leave that one in with the bigger look at, because if
So
staff,
the others will look at it. They should look at that,
they should look at that one.
whether we should have that. Okay.
Yeah, because between assistant planners, planning managers, there's all kinds of titles that could come in there, so. Then the second, Jim, you were stating, so we took care of the first part of what you were gonna state in the motion. What do we wanna give direction, just to review all of these?
The monthly minimum and monthly maximum, and it doesn't look like the city manager has a minimum and a maximum in that. That should be included also.
Is that because they're contract?
It's his contract.
So that's what, okay. So then that we review the monthly minimum maximum for the purpose of potentially lowering the monthly minimum.
Is there a second?
Second.
In favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Did you guys get that motion?
But it's a full review.
Right, so it's just
of
reviewing it, referring it to the,
We're going to refer
Committee.
it to the Personnel Committee.
with that,
And
with that
I
directive
appreciate
from
you
City Council.
volunteering for it, but you don't need to do that on your own. It will be with Jeff
Yes.
and City Manager. Thank you very much. And you're clear? Madam City Manager, you're clear?
Madam Mayor, I have the direction. Who was the second?
It was Councilmember Wilson.
Thank you for that. Any matters from the City Council?
The consent calendar?
Was it before the city,
After
City
14.
Council, so we're going to put that?
Said between 14 and 15.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, actually, no, city council first and then.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I was going to do City Council first, so nothing? Okay, nothing from me. All right. B, anything from City Council?
No, just wanted to let everybody know to invite you to come to the League of California Cities. I'm going to be ending my term finally, so I'll have some more free time as the president of the LA County Division, but it's going to be up in Arcadia because that's where the new president is, but you're all invited.
Thank you. Anything else from matters from council? Okay, let's go to, was it 8?
Payment of bills.
Like David, payment of the bills.
I know one I didn't like, but I just went ahead and said yes, and I had a McGowan every single time.
Well, we know you don't like that, but you did realize at one point when she got us something that she had earned her money, so.
Not the morning.
You need to be reminded frequently of this, Jim. I guess that's my job in life, the chief nag. Okay.
I do need reminded you.
I'm going to do this as tactfully as I can. You know what the issue is your request for reimbursement.
Yes.
And I do believe that last year we had quite a lively discussion about what our ground rules were, policies were for when things should be submitted for reimbursement, and also on a policy of attending the conferences, spending, and the spending of the money on it, that we each had X, there's X amount of dollars. I believe we had a resolution. The resolution may be a little bit outdated because we may have changed our budget levels since then, but I wanted to have a discussion about this and see what we can come up with on this, because as I said, we discussed it at great length either last year or the year before when there were late submissions coming in. And so, B, you want to, I know you have what you think are special circumstances why some of them are late.
There's something where basically, as everybody knows, I've been the president of the LA County Division. It ended up being a much more arduous task than I anticipated, with lots of sleepless nights. I was trying to gather everything together. As you know, I have to like blot out private information on my credit card bill. I was trying to get information in, then I'd be having things I had to do. In the meantime, my job at the DA's office, we have gotten fewer and fewer people with more and more work. So I've had to take on newer responsibilities because I simply am not going to retire, which I could have a long time ago, but I'm not doing it to leave my boss in that lurch. So, so it's been a struggle to do it. I know that there had been a request from staff that I had to put it into a special spreadsheet. Excel spreadsheets are not my forte. It takes a lot longer for me to try to put it, and every event had to be separate. So that part took longer. If I had just been able to give the receipts and just here they are like I had in the past, it could have been in much easier, but I was trying to do it and then I had to stop it and start doing things again. Finally, I said, you know, the ultimate thing was make sure it gets in before the budget ends, because that was the big issue. They didn't want it after the budget. So I tried to do as much as I could with as little sleep as I was getting, sometimes having to pull all-nighters to do everything I was doing, which amazingly I can still do at my age. And so that was the best I could do. I did speak with Madam City Manager about this and all the issues I was going through and my best efforts to try to do it. And I would always say, I'm going to this, I'm going to that, so everybody in the staff knew what things I was doing. But it is, and I try to cut costs as much as possible. There were some extra things I, did had as the LA County President. My term is ended as of August 1st, and I'll be able to, not have as many things I have to do. But it has been beneficial, I believe, very beneficial for the city. I think I've done a really good job, actually, and being able to represent the city, get a lot of support from other cities, because as we are just a small city, we rely on other people who have more influence and ability, because they're larger, to help us when we have needs. And so there's been issues, I think, that have been resolved in that, and I've learned a whole lot that I brought to the city council when we have issues coming up. So be that as to say, I want everybody to know I did as best as I could under the circumstances to try to manage all the competing concerns and do it as quickly as possible.
Well, I shouldn't say nobody, I'm the only one bringing up this issue. I am not trying to pick on you. It happens to be that the checks was cut to you, that I saw. So you've explained even a lot more than I would have asked for about your personal situation. I'd like to get back. There are two things here. I've got the issue of the late submission, and you have circumstances that you believe are extraordinary and extenuating about why they weren't done on time. You do remember the discussion that we had last year about we were going to do it within 30 days, but that felt it needed to be given to 60 days that they would be expensed. And that was because you had said, well, sometimes you get your credit card bills. Most things you can get a receipt for before waiting for your credit card bill, whether you're checking out at a hotel or something like that. But that's neither here nor there. I just think it seems like a relatively easy rule. We have very few quote-unquote rules for us as council members. And I would argue that there are other people on this council. We all admire all the work that you do, both as a district attorney, as an assistant, a deputy, pardon me, DDA, a deputy district attorney, and we appreciate your service at that. We appreciate what you have chosen to do as a member of the league. But be that as it may, just as we talked about earlier, we check everything here, and when I saw this bill, nobody had to flag this for me or anything, because as you know, I look at all the backups when I sign the checks, and I saw them, and I said, well, here we are back where we were last year. And I just don't think it sets a good light for us that we can't even follow a pretty small thing. It's not like I don't think, nobody's here saying that we're not gonna sign the check. That isn't the issue. I think everybody would be fine with signing the check. As far as, because it's late. But, I don't know, I personally have a problem.
And
with
I
that.
apologize, it is my fault. I mean,
I have a question. Is that some rule that if we ever submit something, it has to be an Excel spreadsheet? Because that's a pain in the ass. I'm not gonna do that. If I ever have one, I'm just gonna hand you a receipt.
That's what the resolution calls for. One of the items, it specifically says all expense reimbursement requests must be submitted on an expense report form provided by the city and must explicitly list each expense eligible for reimbursement.
I believe when this came to you for discussion a couple of years ago, you set certain parameters based on the difficulty that staff at that time was having with gathering receipts and keeping track of the itemized costs. And so,
We need to mark, because if I'm not doing it.
I will volunteer for anybody who doesn't want to put that on this, if you give me your stuff, I'll write it up on, and submit it on the form. I'll just give you the form.
I wish I knew about that earlier.
Well, I didn't, well,
It is a
well, and
nightmare.
you hardly ever have any expenses,
I
so
haven't
it's
had an
not a big,
expense
yeah.
in 20 years.
Yeah, so,
I haven't turned one in.
and so, B, I didn't make the offer because I didn't think it was really gonna be that difficult. I've seen the
Yeah.
spreadsheet, so.
I mean, it is a little bit, I'm not, like putting it all in there, but I understand that seems simple when you get to it. It's just being able to get to it
I
and
get
then
it.
not have interruptions and then have the,
I'm only gonna be here for a couple more years unless I'm kicked out before that time, but during the next couple of years, if anybody wants me to input that for them on the Excel spreadsheet, I would do that. I looked at what you submitted, B, and it wouldn't be that hard to do that.
So I have a question on this. If our staff, if it's a hotel, for example, our staff makes a hotel reservation, then it's not subject to that reimbursement policy, right? It's just coming out of city funds as, okay.
That's
'Cause
correct.
that's correct.
I've had a couple of hotel stays in the last several
That's
years.
correct.
So if you were to look at the itemizations that you did through staff in this past year, they're on the credit card bill, and then they're accounted for each month and put into the category of council expenses so that it's noted budgetarily. If a member is seeking reimbursement for costs they expended on their own, that's where the 60-day policy came in so that then staff could make sure it gets into the line item for the budget. And to your point, when we were talking about budget, in the preparation of this budget, staff had requested an additional amount because we were expecting additional expenses that were outside of the budgeted amount based on the fact that we hadn't received potential reimbursements. So
So if you go through us, we'll fill it out.
and they don't typically, when you go to a hotel, they want your credit card. I mean, they don't,
They always want a credit.
They don't bill your credit card. They show a credit card because if
they
you,
do, they take it off mine.
it's for incidentals. That's what your credit card is for. If you paid your reservation for your hotel, that's billed to the credit card that was submitted at the reservation. Your card at check-in is just for incidentals at a hotel.
All I say, when I had the city make the reservation, they took my credit card and billed me for everything. And put everything on there because, if you don't have the city credit card when you check in, they said, oh, no, that was just to hold the reservation, but now you gotta give us your
All
credit
right,
card.
then if that is what happens, then there would be a case for that. So we've taken care of this. You can add that. But my second issue has to do with the amount and the resolution that we did a year or two ago.
And we went over it again a couple of weeks ago.
Yes, and that's what's made that resolution outdated. I think we might need to revisit it again. But Karina, how much have we spent on,
This fiscal year on conferences for council members, et cetera, annual meetings.
Well, it's not just for conferences, is it?
No, it's annual meetings, and there's a list. mostly your conferences, but
Right, city
You can
council member
also-
expenses, yeah.
Right.
yeah, it could be something that's like
Member
non-amount.
expenses,
So
so
total
let's just
is
call it like a
7,667.48 cents.
And I,
That's to go till,
That was
that was for the budget year, the fiscal year that's already closed.
that was for June 30th, that's more than we want to spend.
And I believe that we had not authorized that amount. I think it was less than
No,
that.
the previous budget year is one I thought was 10,000 total.
Fiscal year 23-24 was dropped to 5,000. Prior to that, it was 10,000. And then we, staff recommended to increase it this fiscal year to 7,500.
And we did not.
And the committee rejected the staff's recommendation and kept it at 5,000.
This year. So it was also dropped to 5,000 last year. So, so again, I'm coming back to, we have very few rules for us here. I'm trying really hard to look around and find a few $1,000s, you know, a couple $1,000s to do some fire, you know, break, maybe work with the association and do something for the community, a fire break around Storm Hill, all kinds of things like that. And we're spending more on something that is within our control, and we're spending more on it. And I have a problem with that, especially after it was discussed in detail when we came up with the resolution. That was why we asked for a resolution, is we wanted it kind of memorialized. I'm afraid now, if we were to look at the resolution, there are some things about it that might need to be tightened up, and I would like to have the resolution I'd like to make a recommendation that we revisit that. But it's wonderful. I don't know how much of these expenses, because the only ones I've seen are the ones that were on this last check B, but I have no idea how much of those expenses were associated with your league work. And again, I think it's wonderful that you volunteered to do that, and that you've done, you know, you've done good things, and you feel that it's been a good service. But this money was within our control, and you spent more money than we had allocated for it in the budget. And again, I'm not picking on you, but this is your check. I would be saying it to anybody.
Did anybody else spend any money?
I had one hotel stay.
So you had one. So otherwise, of the 5 council members, he had one and the rest was B, and we went over budget, and the rest of us didn't spend a nickel. So that's just too much.
So I don't know, you know, your term's over now. I don't know how much of this is associated with that, but I would like to take a look, if it's all right with the rest of the council, there's terminology and there are things like non-conference related. I don't know how that gets defined. Is an annual meeting the same as a conference meeting? You know, all those kinds of things. And there are some limitations to the amounts that are in there that we changed. Because it had an annual amount in there. I think at the time when we did the resolution, it was $10,000, and we,
Well,
you know,
the
2
thought
years
was to
ago
be
bumped it down to
2,000 per
5.
council members, but it really was intended 2,000 per council member. And then it ended up, most council members didn't spend it.
Right.
And then it got shifted
Right.
over, but that was the intent.
Right.
Was 2,000 per council.
Right. But we did bring it down to 5, and so if we look at the resolution and see if we need to tighten that up, and maybe someday we'll be going back to that, I don't know, but maybe the terminology needs to be whatever is allowed in the annual budget or something like that, instead of setting an amount of money. I would like to see that cleaned up so that we're not in this situation again. I mean, there's so few things that we actually have control over, and this is one of the ones that we do. And again, B, I don't mean to sound like I'm picking on you. I don't like having this kind of a discussion. I pushed it to the end of the meeting, so there would be even, you know, fewer members of the public here. This is not, you know, this is a real making of the sausage kind of discussion, and I, you know, preferred not to have it at all.
I
But
appreciate that.
I think you knew there might have been some question about it, and you still wanted to go forward with it, so I really had no choice, so. Is everybody okay with?
Madam Mayor, public comment.
I'm sorry. Public comment. Any comments from the public on this? You're just going to smile. Okay, Mr. Eichley? Thank you very much. Hearing none.
I would make a motion, we approve the payment of bills.
All in favor? Aye. And can I also ask to direct staff to bring back a review, to bring back that resolution to review?
The expense policy for review.
I'm sorry, I don't have the resolution number here.
It's resolution.
We would adopt a new resolution
New
if
one.
you change the policy. So,
Thank you. Okay.
and do we, is that a motion, or is that just a general direction?
Can I just make,
Okay.
just direction? Yeah, just direction to the staff. Any matters from staff?
Not at this time. Well, maybe. So with us in the audience, we have Max.
Oh,
So
Max,
he
I'm
showed up.
so
No, he-
sorry.
Come on up, Max, real quick. So Max walked in towards, like, I want to say the latter part of the meeting.
We would have introduced you earlier, I'm so
No,
sorry.
he just arrived, right, Max? So I'm like, I hope I didn't embarrass you. But have a seat, Max, if you want to just.
Thank you.
Max will be joining us as an unpaid intern. As part of what we're trying to establish here. And if you want to just briefly say a little bit about yourself.
Do we remember Max from when he was
Yeah.
yay high coming to our city open house?
This is
Tom
that
Hi-
Max.
That Max. Yes, this is that Max.
I apologize, I didn't realize that was you.
Yes.
Does Max have a last name, or we're just gonna go by Max, okay?
Well, I'll let him introduce himself.
My last name is Amir. My name is Max Amir. My grandfather is Tom Heinsheimer. I'm sure you all know him well. And I recognize, most of you.
We've been around for at least 10 years, so.
Well, yeah, I haven't been here in about that long. It's very, very nice to be back in City Hall, and I'm so excited to start here as an intern, to start soon. I understand that Mayor Mersch personally approved my internship, and I'm very, very thankful and very excited.
Thank you for volunteering. I think it'll be a good experience for you, and you'll be able to help us.
So what have you been doing? You've been going to school, you've been working, what have you been doing?
Well, I go to school in Israel, and yep. I'm back for the summer now.
Okay.
I'm going for another year, and so what better way to be productive and make the most of my time.
And what are you studying?
I'm in a Jewish institution doing Jewish studies, and should have a bachelor's degree in Talmudic law
You will?
at the end of this year.
Wow, that's exciting. 1 year to go, huh?
Sorry?
And 1 year to go.
1 year to go. That's
Oh,
right.
wow, that's exciting. Well, good.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Sorry for the impromptu introduction, but I saw him walk in just like maybe half an hour ago, and I thought it'd be appropriate.
Yeah, sure.
So so he'll be here through mid-August, and part of the internship program that I would like to institute here is they are given a project where they allow practice into theory, a theory into practice, and he'll work closely with Samantha Crew and the emergency preparedness part of our city. And at the very end, prior to him departing back to school, he'll come back and visit the city council and explain the project that he had completed. So this is kind of a good way to introduce this potential program in the future. So
That sounds great. Hopefully you get some credit with your school for this, you know.
so.
Yeah, contact a professor and see if he'll authorize it ahead of time.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, after sitting through another council meeting, I'm sure you probably came to some of your grandfathers too, but after sitting through another one, I'm glad you're still willing to come back and work for us.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Max. Take care. We'll see you. Okay, so I believe is the next item recess to closed session.
Right next to that.
That is correct.
Do I have to ask for public comment on, no? Okay.
And then Christian, I have 9 PM on the dot.
We will recess to closed session.
You can do that on the general public comment. Okay, it looks like we're back up. Madam Mayor, if I may, I'll go ahead and give my closed session report. The city council recessed into closed session at 9:00 p.m. pursuant to the 2 items listed on the agenda. The city then reconvened into open session at 9:59 p.m. and no reportable action was taken, Madam Mayor. Thank you. Nope, we're fine.
Okay, meeting adjourned. Thank you all. Sorry it was so long.